It's exceedingly rare that you can trace back the various moments in recorded history to get a glimpse of the moment, as if preserved in digital amber, that marked the beginning of a new era. A moment without which I would undoubtedly not be here talking to you about this topic today. Now, while there are countless such critical moments on record that we can point to that surely contributed to the building of this foundation that we stand upon today, none of them stand out to me as much as this video of less than 5 seconds in length from October of 2006. Now, what could the significance of this dusty old meme have on me today? Before I get to that, on the last episode of Heroes of Time, we learned about some of the history of arguably one of the greatest video games of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64, and how it served as my introduction into the world of speedrunning. We learned about some of my new friends in the community, legends in their own right, how they've inspired me to try my hand at speedrunning myself, with some even going so far as to dedicate their valuable time, knowledge, and experience to help guide me through the process. We learned about the main storyline of Ocarina of Time, the primary mechanics of the game, and how they can be harnessed for the purposes of speedrunning, and then showcased a cryptic series of creepy and curious interactions that speedrunners take advantage of to completely sequence break the game, allowing them to skip from the first dungeon of the game to the final boss fight. In this installment, I'll be answering the questions that I posed at the end of the last episode. What the hell is going on here to cause this to happen? How did anybody figure this out? And will I be able to develop the skills and maintain the mental fortitude necessary to achieve my goal of within 6 weeks transitioning from someone who is not at all a speedrunner to someone who can say that they've beaten The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time by defeating Ganon in under 25 minutes? Let's find out. Day number 10. I'd quickly passed 50 attempts at completing a speedrun of Ocarina of Time in the Defeat Ganon category. While I had undoubtedly progressed further in many ways that I had originally anticipated, I also found myself utterly failing to complete arguably the most important goal of any speedrun: finishing. Despite having learned all the fundamentals needed to complete this route, it was rapidly becoming clear that I had drastically underestimated what it takes to successfully pull off a full run of even modest speed. Speedrunning, it seems, is very much an example of something for which the combined whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This wasn't something I had realized until I experienced life before and after using the ultimate Ocarina of Time speedrunning tool, the Practice Rom. I undoubtedly wouldn't have made progress without it, but ironically, it's also what had given me what was perhaps a false sense of confidence during my practice sessions. Also referred to by the codename GZ, the Practice ROM is the holy grail of speedrunning utilities, containing countless features invaluable to the training process. Navigating the menus of GZ and taking advantage of even a small subset of its features was a challenge by itself, an entirely unique skill set that I needed to learn. But what it enabled, what it unlocked for me, and undoubtedly many other speedrunners in the OOT community, was the ability to effectively and efficiently practice. The Practice ROM is jam-packed with all sorts of features useful for beginners learning the basics of speedrunning, to expert runners who want to peer into the game's literal memory to help develop new strategies and improve existing ones. Hell, it's even been invaluable for the creation of this video, as I can make use of things like the free camera mode to get multiple interesting angles on various tricks or mechanics in the game for both cinematic and demonstration purposes. Now, even if you scrapped all these great features and left just a single specific feature in its place, GZ would be worth its weight in gold. Now, that feature is called save states. Now, save states do just what they sound like: allow you to instantly save and load snapshots of gameplay with the precision down to a single frame, as many times as you could ever want. This opens up a whole new world for speedrunning, proving the modern-day philosopher Neely right when he said,
"Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes. Repetition legitimizes. Repetition."
I can't stress here enough the emphasis that I want to put on the previous idea I mentioned about effective and efficient practice. The true value in practicing most skills that involve speed, consistency, dexterity, coordination, reaction time, whether it's catching a line drive, tackling a running back, flicking a headshot, or executing a sequence of frame-perfect inputs in a video game, is the ability to develop and refine arguably the most powerful foundational concept associated with any physical skill: muscle memory. We take for granted that during sports practice we do hours of drills with hundreds of different variations, repeating throws and catches and tackles and kicks thousands of times each. It's easy to forget just how valuable these sorts of drills are, how the best of the best in these disciplines put in significant amount of time drilling in these fundamentals, and the practice methods that focus on technique and form, utilizing rapid repetition to develop consistency, often specializing in putting you in awkward or uncomfortable positions to replicate as many unique real-life scenarios as possible, so it'll be second nature when you encounter them in a real game. Now, with all the progress it's made over the last few decades, when viewing it in the contrasting light of other competitive disciplines, what stuck out to me as the most unfulfilled demands in the speedrunning scene is a strong, well-understood foundational understanding around practice. Unlike most sports, speedrunning doesn't have a century of coaches and trainers developing training regimens and refining the art of practice itself. With more money, time, and resources flooding into things like esports, we've already started to see this sort of shift occurring there. A demand for resources and expertise above and beyond simple tutorials, feeding into a boom of supply of things like coaches and trainers. The best teachers and coaches have a deeper understanding of the foundational aspects of their respective disciplines, the challenges that face newcomers, the development cycle and overcoming obstacles like development plateaus, the origination of bad habits, avoiding injuries, etc. The closest thing we have to this in speedrunning circles are video tutorials, and as much as these can be invaluable to the speedrunning community's development, they are, by themselves, not enough to take it to the next level. Until speedrunning progresses to something more structured and systematic, we can be thankful that we have the ability to develop our own personal training regimens and be infinitely more efficient with our execution of them thanks to the tools developed by a handful of legends within the community. Without the use of the Practice Rom, I never would have been able to learn the most pivotal part of this speedrun, an infamous video game glitch known as a wrong warp. And mind you, this isn't just any wrong warp. It's arguably one of the most iconic and legendary of them all, known as Ganondoor. Now, ever since the first time I remember seeing this glitch done, probably about 7 years ago, and even all the way up to the final days of my time running Ocarina of Time after I had done it dozens of times myself, executing the wrong warp correctly absolutely blew my mind. Like some sort of ancient rain dance, the circumstances under which this trick works or fails are largely a mystery to even those who are able to do it with seeming success, although the true underlying mechanisms for what causes what we see here to happen, just like the rainfall on a blisteringly hot, bone-dry summer's day, are far more fascinating than anything mystical or supernatural. In order to truly understand and appreciate both how this trick works and how it was developed, we need a little bit of history. Note that it's entirely possible that the following names and dates I'm going to be sharing here weren't the first people or the first times that these discoveries were made, the earliest of which goes back to June 2006. There's a video posted on YouTube by a user named The Hero MX titled Ocarina of Time, Bug Truco. Now in the video, he describes how interrupting a crouch stab with some interactions, such as activating a gossip stone or initiating a conversation with Navi, Link ends up being glitched in a few different really crazy ways. Now first, as we can see, his sword has a really bizarre, almost ghost-like visual effect as it moves, something we now know is the telltale visual indication of a glitch known as ISG, or Infinite Sword Glitch. Now it's called that because this glitch isn't merely visual, it's actually the result of the fact that for some reason, while in this state, your sword is actively doing damage every single frame as if it's constantly being swung without actually being swung. Now obviously, this would prove to be an incredibly useful tool to make use of in combat, but he also notes one more really curious side effect of Link being in this state.
Oh, sí. Nuestro pequeño Link levita. Es increíble.
For some reason, while ISG is active, Link is unable to jump or fall off of objects or ledges. We would eventually come to learn all the different ways that ISG can be activated, maintained, and cancelled, but as of 2006, the full potential of these effects for the benefit of speedrunning was yet to be fully understood. 4 months later, in October 2006, legendary OOT community member Akrite posted this interesting video to his YouTube channel entitled Skydivers Wanted. Now, it's very likely that nobody watching this back in the day knew what the hell was going on or what he did to cause this behavior for quite some time. Now, 1 year later, in October 2007, he would upload a video entitled Blue Warp Glitch that would showcase a number of interesting interactions, as well as peer into the mind of someone who was repeatedly far ahead of his time when it came to weird interactions and glitches in OOT. Now, as we've come to learn, many video game glitches are caused by characters or objects that are put in conflicted states that the developers either didn't account for or never thought would happen. At the time, Akrite was attempting to discover ways to skip the lengthy cutscenes after Link uses the blue warp portals to exit dungeons, something that would obviously be valuable for speedrunning. Now, presumably attempting to simultaneously combine a number of different conflicting interactions, You can see here some of the earliest uses of a number of different glitches. Now with a full bottle in hand, if you backflip and while in mid-air activate the bottle, this cues up the animation for Link to empty the contents of that bottle upon landing. But if before you land you use another object, like press B to slash your sword, this animation is interrupted. And once again, this jumbled up state with various conflicting behaviors happening at once has a nutty side effect. Now my understanding of this is that the game doesn't really know what to do in this case and falls back on a default animation of sorts, which happens to be Link playing his ocarina. But as we can see here, not only was he holding his sword when he landed, but he doesn't even have an ocarina in his inventory at this point yet anyway, so here Link is stuck in the fully functioning ocarina playing state with his sword up to his mouth. Now this could be done with a number of different items, not just the sword, and as such this glitch is known as ocarina items, or OI for short. Now not only does he explain in the description of this video that this was the method he used to achieve the effect in the Skydiver's Wanted video from over a year before, but he also made a few incredibly interesting comments. First, he mentions that you can do this on all blue warps, and then goes on to say that you can even exit rooms like the Deku Tree boss room. This motherfucker was so far ahead of its time, it's actually scary, and the best part comes from his last comment. Oh well, I thought it had promise, but I came up short on all fronts. Guess you'll have to live with skydiving Link. Little did he know the Pandora's box he had opened. Just a month later, in November of 2007, Rattleman12345 posted a video where he long shots the wall opposite a blue portal, pulling himself through the threshold of the portal, which activates it but allows him to regain control over Link. Now, while this method hasn't proven to be particularly useful for any use cases that I'm aware of, it clearly demonstrates the idea that so many of these bugs and glitches don't simply have one way of achieving them. Now, the folks that came up with them didn't discover the one extremely specific and arbitrary method that would be possible. They merely stumbled across the first of likely countless ways of achieving the same end result, either completely by accident, or sometimes with clever theory crafting and testing. Now in December of 2008, Akrite posted another video where he showed what he had hinted at over a year before, two different methods for utilizing the same sort of behavior for skipping the medallions and stones cutscenes after entering the blue warp. The most interesting version using Furore's Wind at the exact right moment in the warp animation, essentially between when you are given the reward in your inventory, but right before the cutscene starts. Now this once again demonstrates a new level of not only theory crafting, but also understanding of the many underlying details of the implementation of the game. Fast forward 4 years to February 19th of 2012, the day that would serve to be the beginning of a new wave of discoveries that would change this game forever. A person known as CF23 on the Zelda speedrunning forums, also known as Christian F23 on YouTube, posted multiple videos where he demonstrates cutscene skips for all of the adult temples by using ocarina items on a blue warp, and then managing to kill Link in a number of different ways on the exact right frame. Now these are all largely the same sort of demonstration, with one exception. When he attempts to do the same in the Fire Temple, not only does he skip the medallion cutscene, but he also doesn't spawn back at the entrance of the Fire Temple like he had with all of the others. This time he spawns outside of the entrance of the Forest Temple. Now on its face, this seems double useful because not only does it skip the cutscene getting the medallion, but it also serves to skip the cutscene where Link learns the Minuet of Forest, which is useful for some speedrunning categories, but amazingly enough, it was actually far more significant than that. Now in the video's description, he writes, "Somehow doing this one medallion cutscene skip with death warps you to the Forest Temple instead of to the beginning of the temple you're in, which all the others do. Now sometimes instead of warping you to the Forest Temple, the screen just stays black forever. I don't know what triggers the difference." Now this is going to be relevant later, but for now all we need to know is that this triggered a much more thorough investigation of the behavior of the game to try and understand, replicate, and harness this glitch to the advantage of speedrunners. Literally 1 day later, on February 20th of 2012, we can see more testing and theory crafting being done in the Deku Tree by a user, Panda Pajamas, showing a number of different destinations for the wrong warp from the boss room. Now a few days after that, on February 25th, MZX Rules posted a video where he demonstrates another wrong warp, this time from the Deku Tree into Dodongo's Cavern. But what makes this video unique is that it was the first time that I found where someone actually explains the underlying mechanics of this behavior, detailing that this is due to the game preparing to play a predetermined cutscene during the warp process, which is interrupted using one of many different ways at just the right moment, altering the destination scene. My favorite part of this is that scrolling down into the comments we can see the legendary Ocarina of Time glitch hunter, aptly named Glitches and Stuff, a dude responsible for countless pivotal discoveries in the game, says, "This is really cool, but I can't think of many uses." Now surely he was referring to the specific use case shown in the video where you wrong warp to Dodongo's Cavern. I just found it a bit of a funny through the looking glass sort of moment, another instance of ironic foreshadowing from within the community. Now, it was at this point that more investigation and theory crafting was done. A legend named Rob Dog took a deeper look into the internals of the game, some of those underlying mechanics that I mentioned earlier, and based on something he saw in the data, it caused him to theorize that it should be possible to wrong warp from the Deku boss room to the end of the game at the beginning of the tower collapse sequence. Now, another legend named Sockfolder began testing it, and the rest was history, although unfortunately footage of this testing was no longer available as far as I could find. Now on April 13th, a user named Enterim posted a video showing a consistent strategy for dying as Link while simultaneously killing Gohma, a trick we now refer to as double KO. This is important because one of the key requirements of executing the wrong warp is having to access the door outside of the boss room, something that you can't normally do due to the giant stone slab that blocks the way at the start of the fight. It was discovered that by killing Gohma and doing a simple save and quit, all attempts at doing the wrong warp would cause it to fail, so dying inside the boss room and backtracking from the entrance, at which point the giant stone slab would be removed, seemed to be the only way. Now by April 14th, we were already developing consistent setups for the trick, now called Ganondoor. Fast forward a year later, June 12th of 2013, and Glitches and Stuff posts a video that demonstrates that it was theoretically possible to utilize Gohma herself to clip Link through the stone barrier, by combining the physics of her attacks with the levitation properties of the infinite sword glitch we discussed earlier, and also that you can kill her from the other side of the wall. These two techniques combined, if they were able to be done quickly and consistently during runs, would definitely save time over the double KO method if performed optimally. Because in this case, you could kill Gohma, exit the boss room through the door that you entered from, and then re-enter directly from there without needing to die and backtrack all the way from the entrance of the dungeon. Now, you probably won't be surprised to know that it only took a few days to find multiple consistent setups for this trick, and from here, the rest is history. You now know how all of the requisite building blocks to complete Ganondoor were independently discovered at different times by different people, and then were able to be combined piece by piece due to the community's collaboration, sharing an archival of acquired knowledge and experience, and some pretty genius problem solving. Well, you actually know all of the building blocks except for one. What was it in the game data that Rob Dog saw that caused him to theorize that Ganondoor would be possible in the first place? We know the combined result of all of these tricks, but we still don't fully understand the what and the why underneath it all. At the heart of this trick is ultimately the original developer's attempt at architecting a game ahead of its time, pushing the software and hardware of the feisty little N64 to its limits. With limited resources available to them on earlier generation consoles, developers needed to be creative with how they architected the systems responsible for giving us the gameplay experiences that we all remember. Despite the debate that folks still have to this day about whether or not Ocarina of Time should be considered an open-world game, OOT was absolutely one of the first games that, at least for me, felt massive, open, and seamless. This is, of course, a cleverly crafted illusion. Given the tech constraints that game developers faced in the late 90s, there really isn't any way they could have stitched together all of the areas in this game into a single physical space as the game leads us to believe. The devs had to be clever. A quick side note, in prior videos I've explained in a fairly accessible and easy to understand way two relevant topics: how video games work at a high level using what's called a run loop, and how computers turn electricity into ones and zeros, base 2 numbers known as binary, and how binary can be represented in base 16 or hexadecimal to be more easily readable by you and me. If you want some more context into any of these things I'm going to be talking about today, go check out those videos, and hopefully they're helpful. When Link travels throughout the world, he's constantly entering and exiting different major areas, which we're going to refer to as scenes. Hyrule Field, all the various dungeons, villages, and towns, these are all their own unique scene. Now, if we look at all the different scenes, we can see that each of them has a number of entrances, doorways, portals, or passages. Given that the N64 can only handle a limited amount of stuff loaded in at once, whether it's buildings or NPCs or environmental or ambient effects like running water and background music, the devs needed to be as efficient as possible, only loading the bare minimum for what's needed right now, and making sure to make use of recycled data used previously for other things that are no longer needed. When Link travels between any of the countless passageways between areas, the game attempts to transition elegantly between the two in two primary ways. Now, the first is quite seamless, an illusion created by clever pathing and map design that serves to mask the loading of new areas and the unloading of prior areas. Because of the way this was designed, there's no way that you could have ever realized that before you crawl into this hole, there's actually nothing on the other side other than the bare minimum to give you the illusion of a seamless, connected world. It's not unless you're able to take advantage of some of the cool features of the Practice Rom that I mentioned earlier, namely the free camera mode, that the true behavior of the underlying game can be seen from a totally new perspective. There's something about this that makes me grin and shake my head at the cleverness of it all. It's probably for the same reasons why I love much of what the legends Penn and Teller do on stage. Very often they'll show you a trick the first time and, like many illusions, seems downright impossible. But then they'll go ahead and show you the very same trick, but in a way that reveals both how the trick is actually done, the sources of misdirection and obfuscation that makes the illusion work, and it also reveals not only the ingenuity it takes to craft something both entertaining and confounding, but also the skill required to pull it off without the benefit of something like actual magic. Now, this brings us nicely to the second major way in which OOT transitions between scenes, and I suppose it's appropriate that the previous example allows us to elegantly segue to our next example, another kind of stage performance, the theater. For all intents and purposes, at any given time, your current scene in the game is the only location that needs to actually exist in the world. If you could clip through the walls or see through the boundaries of any of the various areas in the game, you won't be encountering the area that you'd expect to be adjacent to it. It's simply a black void of nothingness. You can kind of think of it like a theater stage. Although the lights go down briefly between scenes and they come back up, you suddenly find the scenery has changed entirely. You didn't really go anywhere. You simply accept this change of scenery as some kind of suspension of disbelief. Now, instead of stage workers running on stage, rolling away props, and carefully placing appropriate set pieces for the upcoming scene, the software unloads chunks of memory it uses to store things like items, characters, textures, and utilizes any data available to it, some fresh, some recycled, to generate what's necessary for the upcoming scene. For example, when you enter the Kokiri shop, the game isn't moving Link from outside of a building to inside of a building in a literal 3D space. The interior of the shop does not exist while you're standing outside. All the game is doing is simply tearing down what it's loaded from one area and assembling a new scene from scratch with some of the same bits, both literally and figuratively. Now, the fact that this was done without the use of an obvious loading screen is part of what makes it feel so seamless and smooth. You can do all of this in fractions of a second, the moment between an exit animation, a fade to black, and a fade into the next scene. Now, it's deep down in the underlying details of the scene transition process that we can find the exploit that makes the wrong warp possible. Let's start with the most basic example and work our way up from there. Every scene has one or more entrances, and every entrance and scene is assigned its own unique identifier, which is just a simple number that the computer represents as a hex value. Let's say you turn on your Nintendo 64 and load your saved game. In order for the game to set up the initial scene after it loads, it uses a process that dynamically calculates where to spawn you and in what state. And in order to do that, it needs a few different pieces of information. First, it checks a value known as the entrance index. This value is set a number of different ways. If you loaded a saved game, if Link's respawning after he died, if he's entering a loading zone or a doorway between two scenes, or when certain timers expire or cutscenes are over. The value that's set here corresponds to an entry in a table called the entrance table, which lists all of the unique entrances for every scene in the game. Now, let's say you were Child Link and you saved the game during daytime in Kokiri Forest. You quit and then came back later. When your game was loaded, the next entrance index would be set to the hex value 00BB, which corresponds to the index in the table specifying the interior of Link's house, spawning at his bed, as a child during the day. Now, as the scene is set up for the first time, the game looks and sees if there's any special cutscenes it needs to play, and if not, there's nothing special that needs to be done for that. Then an important number called the scene setup index is calculated. The resulting value for the scene setup index is a combination of a number of different values, namely the cutscene modifier, which in this case is 0, and 2 other modifiers, one for the time of day and the other for Link's age. Both are also 0 in this case. So this leaves us with a scene setup index of 0, which is then added to the next entrance index, at which point the result is set to the current entrance index. Then the scene transition takes place, which ultimately spawns Link inside of his house, next to his bed, as a child, during the day. Now that was pretty much the most basic example. Let's consider 2 slightly more complicated examples, beginning with a case where Link is a different age and we're saving at a different time of day. The initial next entrance index is going to be set to the same value as before. We don't have any special cutscenes to play, but because it's nighttime and we're adult Link, that leaves us with a scene setup index of 3, which when added to our next entrance index gives us a resulting current entrance index of 00BE. And well, wouldn't you know it, that entry in the entrance table is the bed spawn inside Link's house as an adult at nighttime, exactly what we wanted. Now the pattern that we see here, where this entrance has 4 rows corresponding to the 4 possible time and age combinations, follows for pretty much every entrance in the game. It might not be possible to spawn as a particular age at a given entrance, and there may be no difference at all between the scene during day or night, but that doesn't matter. Given the process by which the game transitions between the scenes, we're pretty much guaranteed to have at least 4 entries in the table for any given entrance. Now note there that I said at least 4. In what cases would there be more? That brings us to our final example, dealing with cutscenes. Let's take the initial cutscene right after we start the game, beginning with Link in his bed, having the nightmare where he confronts Ganondorf outside the castle. Again, the initial entrance index is going to be set to the same value as before, but this time because we want to play a specific cutscene, in this case the cutscene number is 0, which leaves us with a cutscene offset of 4, the value that's applied to every cutscene number. Now given what I said a moment ago, you can probably guess at this point what the relevance of the number 4 here is. Because we have a special cutscene, we're actually going to be ignoring the other 2 modifiers for time and age, which leaves us with a scene setup index of 4, which is then added to the next entrance index to generate a current entrance index of 00BF, which when we look into the table, we can see corresponds to the same scene and spawn, but in this case is an entry specific to Link's nightmare cutscene during the intro. Now later on in the intro, after Navi is tasked to meet up with Link, when she enters his house and tries to get him out of bed, this cutscene number is 1, which means that the calculated scene setup index is going to be 5. 4 from that hard-coded offset, and 1 for the cutscene number, which when combined with the next entrance index gives us a resulting value of 00C0, which as we can see is the entry in the table for the waking up cutscene. So now that we understand the basic logic surrounding the scene transition process and what these numbers mean, let's apply this knowledge to the original question of what the hell is happening during the Ganondoor Wrong Warp. Hey, what's up guys? How we doing? I just wanted to pop in here really quickly and say thank you guys for all the support, all the comments, all the nice messages you guys have been leaving me. Things have been crazy on my end, and then obviously for everybody else. It's just been crazy, but we're coming into spring. I think we can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. In the meantime, I hope you and yours are staying safe and staying healthy. What I wanted to do really quickly is announce that my new and improved merch store is currently in development. I've gone through a number of merch distributors, a bunch of big companies, and honestly, I haven't been happy with any of them until fairly recently. I decided to partner up with one of my best friends growing up. I've known him my whole life. He's an entrepreneur, and partnering up with him to try and get something underway. I'll keep you guys updated as we get a little bit closer to completion. But in the meantime, to celebrate the completion of the first couple of episodes of my new speedrunning series, I wanted to announce that I have a limited edition, limited production run of the Veritas Hero of Time t-shirts. Going to be putting them out in 3 different color combinations. The red shirt with the white logo, blue shirt with the yellow logo, and kind of like a charcoal black color with a gold logo. Didn't want to go and price these ridiculously like a lot of other folks do with their merch. And in my opinion, when it comes to merch, especially when you're dealing with something you're going to be wearing, the most important part is comfort. I opted to go with these super soft, like heather fabric, really, really nice and light, super comfortable. It's not just like some, trashy merch tee that you'd grab off a shelf and go print something on it. It really is a shirt that I would wear, honestly, any day. So I'm going to go ahead and have a link down in the description for you guys to check it out. Like I said, it's going to be limited time. I'm not sure exactly what we're going to be doing for production, but if you want to get your hands on these before they sell out, click on the merch link I put down in the description and help support the stream. Thanks, guys. Alright, let's start with how the process is intended to occur. After the scene transition occurs, when Link first enters the boss room inside the Deku Tree, his current room index has been updated to the index of the Deku Tree boss room, which is 40F in hex. After defeating Gohma, when Link touches the blue portal, there's one additional layer of complexity from our prior examples that needs to go on here, because when he touches the portal, there's actually a short delay that needs to happen before the cutscene transition takes place. Players lose control of Link as he walks into the portal and is slowly lifted up and out of the boss room, the animation of which takes a little bit of time. And then after a fade to black, the transition takes place, and a cutscene is initiated outside of the Deku Tree where Link receives the Kokiri Emerald. To account for this, as soon as you touch the blue portal, the game starts a timer that counts up from 0 and is programmed to kick off the scene transition after a predetermined length of time, the length of the blue warp animation, which in this case is 101 frames. Now, as soon as the timer hits 101, the scene transition begins, fades to black, the next entrance index is set to the index for the Kokiri Forest cutscene, which is 00EE, and the cutscene number is set to 1. Finally, the last step in the process is to calculate the scene setup index, which in this case has a value of the cutscene number plus the offset, which is 5, which is then combined with the next entrance index, updating the current entrance index with the result of 00F3. This is the entry that corresponds to the expected cutscene, so all is good. The way that all this was implemented is a little bit clumsy, but in some ways quite clever, but very likely just came down to practicality. Game developers don't start by building the intro cutscene and then build the game environment out in literal chronological or spatial order, ending with the final boss fight and the final cutscenes right before they ship the game. They very likely start building the environments with much of the details around the story or the final designs of each scene still being created, with probably only a few key elements of the story or world known at the beginning, maybe like the intro or maybe even the ending sequences. And then during the design and development process, they'll fill in the pieces in between in whatever arbitrary order they receive them. So with this in mind, it makes sense that the entrance table data would be in a seemingly random order, very likely matching the order in which the game was developed in, with much of the details about the story and final designs of each scene still in design. If you had asked me what area to develop first if I had started with a blank slate, I would probably have started with the Great Deku Tree, as it's very likely known early on that this would be the first dungeon in the game, which is a nice self-contained area where lots of mechanics and environmental interactions like climbing, jumping, opening doors, and chests, and fire and water are all introduced. I'm willing to bet that it's no coincidence that the entrance table starts with the Great Deku Tree and Dodongo's Cavern. They were very likely some of the first areas designed and built in the game, probably during the prototyping or testing phase. Now, while this design allows for total freedom and flexibility in the order and scope of developing the environment of the game, when combined with some of the special cases that we're going to be talking about, like the blue warp and the associated animations and timers, this introduces something quite problematic. Something called a race condition. Now, race conditions occur when the behavior of a system relies on the specific timing or sequencing of events that it doesn't have complete control over. Now, most of the time, if all goes well, there's not a problem. But if the timing or the ordering of the events that you receive is unexpected, and there are no controls or safeguards put in place to manage them, very often the resulting behavior can be quite problematic. Rewind all the way back to February 19th of 2012, the day the Christian F-23 accidentally discovered the warp from the Fire Temple boss room to the entrance of the Forest Temple. The whole point of the Death Warp was to bypass the cutscene where Link receives the medallion, and at the end result is the same as when Link dies normally inside of the temple. He should respawn back at the entrance. Now, when this accidental discovery was made and folks in the community started digging into what could have caused this to happen, it wouldn't take very long for the explanation to become clear. Looking at the entrance table to try to suss out what was happening, if we look at the entry listings where the Fire Temple's entrance is, our expected warp point, we see that it has the 4 default values we all know and love, but if we happen to glance down at the following 4 entries in the table, wouldn't you know it, we see the 4 default entrances of the Forest Temple. Was this a coincidence? Or perhaps a clue? It wasn't long before we found out that what happened wasn't a coincidence. Due to the nature of this little race condition, it's actually kind of insane to think how unlikely it was that this was accidentally discovered. Now let's look at the same timeline, although this time we're going to perform the requisite steps needed to successfully pull off the Ganondoor Wrong Warp. First, Link is going to activate the blue portal from the boss room, starting the timer. But in this case, he's going to do so while activating Ocarina items, retaining control over Link. You can see right in the middle of the screen there's a number 0. That's actually the value of the cutscene timer we have printed on screen. Link does what appears to be a bunch of random actions, running for a bit, throwing a Deku Nut, and then side-hopping. All the while, the timer is counting up from 0, and right at about this point, when he reaches the threshold on the way to the door, we can see that the timer pauses. Now he makes his way over into the corner, preparing to go through the door, turning around here, which lets a couple more frames go by. As soon as he enters the door and the fade to black is initiated, we can see that the timer starts counting up again, stopping at exactly frame 101. Now it's at this point that the blue warp timer fires. Just as before, the next entrance ID and cutscene are set to the Kokiri Forest cutscene entrance, but what's different here is that we activated a door that takes us to the basement room in the Deku Tree right outside of the boss room. Now it's at this point that the scene transition process finishes. The scene setup index is calculated, which just as before is 5, but instead of being added to the Kokiri Forest cutscene value, it's instead added to the Deku Tree basement room value, giving us a value of hex 257. And because there's no cutscenes associated with the Deku Tree basement room here, all we have in the entrance table are these 4 default values. And as you probably guessed by now, we've jumped to the next set of entrances, which just so happens to be the tower collapse sequence at the end of the game. What we've done here is exploit the race condition that exists due to the fact that multiple objects have read and write access to the same bit of memory at the same time, a situation you almost universally want to avoid when writing software. Both the blue warp timer code and the normal scene transition process related to the door have access to the next entrance ID variable at the same time, the flaw in software design that we ultimately capitalize on for our evil speedrunning deeds. So now that we understand exactly what causes this phenomenon to occur, we can do what speedrunners do best and develop strategies we can reliably and consistently pull off as fast as possible during a speedrun. We really only have 2 requirements. We have to maintain control of Link during the blue warp process, and after entering the door to the Deku Tree basement, we want the blue warp timer to be at exactly 101. Thanks to our skydiving buddy from earlier, we already know that we can use the bottle in hand to activate Ocarina items and maintain control of Link when entering the blue warp, so all we need to do is figure out a way to control the blue warp timer. And we learned earlier how objects in the world are tied to the viewport of the camera, being culled if far enough away from the camera or out of sight. We'd eventually learn that because the timer is linked to the blue portal, with careful camera manipulation and movement, we essentially have our own pause button on the timer. At about this point in the threshold of the passageway to the door is where the blue warp will be culled, pausing the timer, as long as we're Z-targeting the camera and looking away from the portal. All we need to do is control the amount of time that elapses as we make our way towards the door, which brings us back to that important little concept I mentioned in the first episode, normalization. As always, there's basically an infinite number of setups. Some are faster, some are easier, some are more or less forgiving, but what they all have in common is they're normalized setups with consistent, well-known timings that all attempt to control the timer value appropriately, allowing us to take advantage of the race condition. Once I understood this process and applied what I had learned to my speedrunning endeavors, I ended up being far more consistent with my execution, because I now understood what I was actually attempting to do at a much deeper level, and could apply this understanding to identify the causes of my failures by looking at the end result. If when I went through the door I ended up in the Deku Tree basement, that meant that I was too soon. The timer was not yet at 101. I had rushed the setup. If I ended at the Deku Tree cutscene, that meant that I was too late. I had opened the door too late and the transition process was already underway, so rather than overriding the correct destination with my new intended destination, the opposite happened. Now, it's not necessarily required that you understand the underlying mechanisms for these sorts of tricks, but as soon as you do, you realize how valuable this knowledge can be. As soon as I learned this, it took my runs to the next level. The race for sub 25 was on. Run number 54. With the use of the Practice Rom and save states, I was able to finally successfully make my way through the wrong warp down through the tower collapse. For the first time since I was a kid, I was experiencing the end of the game, and along with it, the incredible frame drops that the N64 has as it struggles to render all of the incredible detail that these final moments had to offer. While executing tricks that rely on muscle memory for speed, timing, and rhythm, changes in things like frame rate can make it really difficult to be consistent, and that mixed with the nerves of trying to successfully complete my first few runs quickly led to some less than optimal moments. What is this frame rate? Ah! No, dude, I knew it. I knew it. As soon as I pressed the button, I knew it. I fucking knew it, dude. No. Run number 55. On the very next run, I managed to stay cool, again using save states, but this time trying to be far more careful not to crash the game, and managed to complete my first ever unofficial run with the Practice Rom with a time of 45 minutes and 45 seconds. I literally don't even know what to do. I mean, it can't get much worse than that, at least, right? Run number 56. I was on a roll. The very next run, I managed to play much better during the later splits, not needing to abuse save states quite as much as before, finishing the run with a time of 32 minutes and 45 seconds. I was well on my way of achieving my goal, and it was at this point that I knew it was going to take quite a lot of practice to get as smooth, fast, and consistent as I was going to need to be, but also it's going to take a little bit of ingenuity and creative problem solving.
I'm gonna have to science the shit out of this.
Now, something I learned quite early on was that even though certain tricks or techniques were commonly categorized as beginner or advanced, often they were so different from one another that it didn't seem fair comparing their relative difficulties. I found myself struggling to be consistent with lots of strats that were considered beginner level, techniques that other runners who were at my same skill level pulled off without issue. But then I saw more advanced tricks from other runners that folks had told me not to bother trying, as they were above my pay grade, but I found I was able to do them quite easily. It became evident that my key to success wasn't going to be doing the easiest method or the fastest method, but it was the method that was right for me. That was going to take some experimentation, careful consideration over the relative risks, rewards, speed versus consistency, and finally, optimization versus my own personal enjoyment. Now, the pivotal part of this run where this proved to be the most critical was the entirety of the Deku Tree dungeon and boss fight. Now first, something about the slow climb all the way up the vines, the RNG of avoiding the lurking Skulltulas, felt really boring to me, so much so that I found myself regularly checking out mentally during this part of the run, which led me to make tons of stupid mistakes in the process. Second, something about the timing of the jump slash after breaking the web during the B1 skip made doing it successfully feel like a coin flip. I just couldn't get it consistently. Now this left me, more often than I was enjoying, requiring that I do the easy but lengthy and boring annoying backup strategy. Now, after practicing for some time and eventually adopting pause buffering to account for the difficulty in setting up the visual cue for the jump slash, I was disappointed to discover that it actually rendered much of the benefit of the trick obsolete, which was skipping the web down to the basement 2 level. Now, among a few things that I discussed in the last video that will trigger the physical loading in of the web, like leaving and re-entering the Deku Tree after the first web was broken, I just discovered that pausing the game while anywhere between the main level and B1, like as you're falling down here, and then unpausing it will cause it to load in as well. So this meant that I could use pause buffering to drastically increase my chances of properly timing the jump slash, but that would require that I burn the second web using one of the other tricks that I either couldn't do or didn't want to do because they were less fun. What I needed to do was create a strategy that fulfilled the following requirements. I needed to get past both webs in a less boring and more consistent way, collecting the necessary resources I needed for the endgame, and avoid doing any of the annoying tricks I didn't want to do. That was already going to be a tall order, but I also wanted the strategy to be just as fast as the average time between a successful B1 skip and the failed attempt with the backup. Now, this all sounded too good to be true, but surprisingly, it wasn't. As I was being exposed to a bunch of different content creators and making new friends amongst the talented runners in the OOT community, I came across this handsome lad. I could go on at length about some of my frustrations with many of the tutorials that I tried to follow while learning this speedrun, but I'll spare you the rant and just say that this man's informational content was a lifesaver. Not only is his content extremely high quality, but also goes into the history of the tricks, how to troubleshoot if you're having difficulties with those tricks, and the how and the why behind them, which when searching for tutorials on these subjects was hard to come by. I gotta give mega props to the weather up there. His videos helped me countless times along the way, and one day I happened to stumble upon one of his tutorials on the much faster, more modern, and far trickier route for the same category, utilizing a trick called the Get Item Manipulation, or GIM, to effectively magic a bottle out of thin air, which avoids needing to travel to Kakariko Village at all. This is the route that the world record holder Richard Sage and most of the people contending for the world record are using right now. Now, what I found particularly interesting about this route is that it utilized a few different tricks for the early parts of the Deku Tree, some that proved not relevant for my case as they were directly related to the GIM strat. There were others that inspired me to assemble my own personal strategy, a Frankenstein mix-up of different tricks from different runners, 2 of which just so happen to fulfill all the requirements I outlined before, and more. These 2 tricks are called Quick Putaway and Mega Sidehop. And when I refer to Quick Putaway, I'm actually referring to one of multiple discrete elements that all combine to make up this trick, which include the concepts of the putaway animation, the broken stick, glitch damage values, and the power crouch stab. Now let me explain how this all works with a little bit of help from the weather up there. We'll start with the putaway animation.
Now right now you notice on the A button on screen, the blue button, it says put away. If I hit A, Link will put away whatever item he's holding. Running around, it will say attack. And if you hit it, he'll either roll, or if you're targeting, he'll do a jump slash, something like that. It takes about a second or so while you're standing still for put away to show up as an option. However, if you're also moving slower like this, it will stay on screen.
Now, if we're able to properly interrupt the putaway animation on exactly the right frame, such as by taking damage, this causes the stick to be in a glitch state that the developers never intended for, and we call this quick putaway. Now, combined with one more stick-related glitch called broken stick, we'll experience quite an interesting and also useful result.
If you break your stick against like a wall, Link will go, do the attack, and then there's a quick animation of him actually breaking the stick, holding it, and then dropping it or putting it away and losing it.
Due to how the Deku Stick hitboxes interact with the environment, jump slashing at a specific distance from an object, like a wall, will cause the stick to break, but also results in Link not putting the broken stick away as before. Instead, he holds on to a glitched broken stick, still able to use it like before. You can both see and hear the difference between the normal stick breaking and a glitched broken stick here. Now, by combining these 2 glitched effects, broken stick and quick putaway, we actually create an even more game-changing result, known as glitch damage values. Now, as we previously learned, the Ocarina of Time devs love them a good table. When it comes to keeping track of damage modifiers, this was no different. Normally, when Link is about to do damage to an enemy or the environment, the game looks up the attack in a damage table to find its corresponding damage modifier value. Now, this modifier is a 32-bit number, or an 8-digit hex number, which is normally all zeros except for a single digit whose position and value indicates what the damage modifier is, which it can then use to determine the resulting damage using an entirely different damage chart. Now, this includes things like stuns from Deku Nuts, the boomerang effect, Din's Fire and Ice Magic, and more. Now, when Link jump slashes with a glitched stick, which is an otherwise invalid attack, the result is that the game ends up looking out of the bounds of the table and sets a garbage value for that damage modifier. In this case, the value being 16171617. Now, this value is handled as a bit mask, the details of which you probably don't care about, but what's relevant here is the end result. That value that's stored during jump slash is equivalent to these 14 different damage modifiers combined. And as you may recall, whatever damage value is stored last is used during crouch stabbing until it's overwritten by some other damage value. Now, among the other 13 effects, some known and some not, the end result is that all of these tricks that we've done combined is that we now have the ability to burn the web with Din's Fire using just our sword. Now, the following is from a video that Danny B made about a year ago that compares the Gim route at the time with and without the quick putaway trick, which in his case ended up saving about 19 seconds. Now, counterintuitively, because I'm not only much slower of a runner, but I'd also be comparing the new technique with a much slower strat of climbing up to the top and jumping down, my time saves had the potential to be much higher and more consistent. All I needed to do was find a suitable replacement for the jump slash to get me onto the top platform in the basement, which would prove to be more challenging than I had initially thought. Now, I did a load of testing to try to come up with my own unique method to consistently jump slash from the main floor of the Deku Tree to reach the high basement platform, but it became evident rather quickly that even if I were to discover the setup for a jump slash down to the basement, that left me still needing to figure out a way to deal with the second web, because as I mentioned before, jump slashing would have the effect of clearing the glitch damage, so that ruled that out. The fact that I might have been pause buffering different aspects of the setup ruled out any tricks that would prevent the B1 web from loading in, so I was stuck. Now, that was until I discovered another trick that would perfectly fit the bill, tying the whole strategy together. This one, the Mega Sidehop. Now, unlike the last trick, there's really no need to get into the major technical details about the Mega Sidehop. It's fairly straightforward. With the proper lineup, which is fairly generous and can be done in a few different ways, you can roll into this Deku Baba, and as he attacks, perform a well-timed shielded side hop, and that'll cause you to go flying back at just the right angle and the right speed to allow you to land successfully on the platform. Now, as long as you avoided doing any attacks that would overwrite our damage glitch sword, you should have maintained the glitch state and can utilize it to burn this web as well. Now once that's done, we can do some jump slashes to kill these Deku Babas, getting some extra resources for the rest of the run, and which will clear out that glitch state that I talked about, and make our way down to Gohma. Now I had actually successfully created what was the perfect compilation of tricks. It was my own unique strategy designed for both my enjoyment and for the coolness factor, and it was faster than my alternatives. I genuinely felt like a fucking pioneer. Not long after I put together this world-changing 200 IQ strategy, I discovered that this particular set of tricks had been known for quite a long time. The reason why I didn't come across it was because nobody really used it, and the reason why nobody uses it is because it uses a weird mixture of beginner and advanced strategies. Now most folks who want to be as competitive as they can, want to be as fast as they can, and would be doing the faster GIM route. Otherwise they'd probably opt for the easier to learn OG route that I started with. I feel like this is a really interesting example of how different people can independently come to the same solutions to the same problem. Although it does also kind of remind me of that whole million monkeys and a million typewriters writing Shakespeare thing. Oh well. Either way, I was very pleased. It may not have been totally unique, but it was something that I developed on my own, inspired by a handful of other tricks and ideas that other runners had used before me. My goal of experiencing what it was like to work on developing my own strategy, to do something that I'd been so curious about, had been accomplished. Now after this, so many more runs made it to Gohma, and the grind continued. Run number 80. Now after struggling with a few of the middle segments, but managing to pull off a strong wrong warp and collapse sequence, I was on my way to achieving a new PB. After collecting the Master Sword, I fumbled with the jump slash, causing me to hesitate getting ISG with the stick, and then... Oh shit! Oh! No! Fuck me in the ass, chat! Shit! Run 83. Just 3 runs later, having saved considerable time between the Deku Tree and Collapse thanks to the new strats I developed, I was on pace for my first ever sub 30-minute run, the next major milestone of my journey. I found myself struggling once again getting ISG during the Ganon fight, but eventually powered through to earn another new PB at 29 minutes and 36 seconds. The next day, I received the official Japanese N64 cart that I had ordered on eBay and began doing official, legit runs. No more save states, no on-screen input display, no training wheels. I reset my attempt counter back to 0 and was on my way to becoming a legend. Official run number 24. After 23 failed attempts, I found myself on this run. I was behind from the first split, slowly losing more and more time as the run went on. Now, I hadn't yet finished a legit run with an accepted version of the game, but I also knew that I had previously abused save states a bunch with the Practice Rom, particularly during the later splits, so there was still time to be saved later in the run. After a successful Gohma Clip, my nerves were getting to me. And during the setup for the wrong warp, my finger slipped off the stick, throwing off my timing. Now, successfully doing the wrong warp was unlikely at this point. Oh no. Oh my god. Somehow I managed to pull it off, completing my first ever attempt at the Ganondoor glitch without save states, bringing my run that was over a minute behind to only 2 seconds behind. I'd never gotten this far on a legit run, and seeing 17 minutes on the timer made me think, could this be the run? So soon? Now, the initial part of the collapse sequence was smooth. I made it to the Stalfos fight with 19.5 minutes and 2 sticks. I just needed to get a damage-boosted ISG, take these 2 down, and it'd be on to the final boss fight. Shit. Oh, fuck. Now, by the end of the collapse sequence, I had gained the better part of a minute, the fastest pace I'd ever achieved. I just had to focus, don't get hit, avoid the fire, and clutch it out. Now I managed to get ISG on the 3rd try, and then... This was my first official run, clocked in at 25 minutes and 45 seconds. And looking at my splits, the reality of what I had to do had not yet sunk in. This was the best run I had ever done. I pulled off all of the run ending tricks to save all that time, but it was the first 15 minutes of the run where I lost all my time. That meant that not only was I going to have to keep clutching the end splits like I just had done, but I also had to do so at the end of a fast, consistent, and nearly flawless for me beginning. That was the next day that I picked up the Nintendo Wii so that I could play on the Virtual Console for smoother, higher resolution gameplay. What that meant was that I needed to get used to a new but awkwardly similar controller, just as I was getting consistent with the Nintendo 64. I once again had my work cut out for me and was unaware of what I was up against. Run number 46. Now, after a blazing fast start, but losing a little bit of momentum after Kakariko and into the Deku Tree, I was at the Gohma fight. This run had the potential to save time, and while attempting the more conservative double KO strat, I fat-fingered the inputs to space myself out from Gohma for the jump slash, accidentally turning the camera away from her, and in my moment of panic, I jump slashed from too far away, killing Gohma without being close enough for her to simultaneously deal the final half heart of damage, ending the run. I didn't die, did I? Why? Run 48. Just 2 runs after that devastating fail, while attempting the mega side hop, I hadn't realized that I only had 1 heart left. Fuck. Run number 49. I was making fairly good time all the way down to the Scrubs fight, which I completely nailed, putting me 25 seconds ahead of my PB. I then executed the double KO flawlessly. I was calm, cool, collected, confident as ever. Please don't fuck this up, Veritas. I botched one of the easier tricks in the run, doing Ocarina items while flipping into the blue portal. The run was dead. At this point, I was, as the kids say, malding. Honestly, like, I'm an idiot for not... I should just download the fucking... I should just get... Run number 51. After having an insanely good start, putting me 30 seconds ahead going into the Deku Tree, I botched the interior leading up to the wrong warp multiple times. And although I salvaged it by the time I was at the Ganon fight, I was already over the 25-minute mark. At this point, all I needed was a confidence booster. I just needed a W to get me pumped again. All I needed to do was focus on getting ISG, and... even though another run was dead, at least I could take solace in knowing that my community was there to support me. Alright, so I was getting delirious. I felt like I was losing my mind. I even started to believe that maybe I needed to take a play out of the world record holder's book. The world record holder who was here watching my attempts, I'm sure with a nice bucket of popcorn. Maybe I should do what he does, to calm my nerves towards the end of a run on record pace.
Alright, I gotta do some push-ups. Yes! Woohoo! Let's go!
I should have done push-ups. I don't know. Should have done push-ups. Run number 83. I was on fantastic pace going into the Gohma fight. I was feeling smooth and confident. But after failing to clip through the wall with Gohma, in the heat of the moment, I forgot that I had too much health to pull off the double KO. Oh no. I fucked up. I'm such an idiot, dude. One more dead run. Run number 87. An excellent pace again. This time successfully pulling off the Gohma Clip, but nerves got the better of me and I jumped the gun, throwing the Deku Nut to stun Gohma before she could step closer to the wall, causing her to be too far away for me to hit. Fuck, man! I'm so fucking done with this fucking bullshit, dude. I can't. I'd attempted over 60 runs since my 25-45, and not a single one had even come close to that, let alone approached my goal of sub 25 minutes. The pressure was too much for me. All these repeated failed attempts, failures that I had no one to blame for except myself, were starting to take a toll. I had enough, and I'd given up. Until the speedrunners that I've been looking up to throughout this process, the ones that I was trying to learn from, trying to emulate, the folks that had invested their valuable time to help coach me, sit through hours of boring, subpar amateur speedruns, they'd done thousands, even tens of thousands of attempts, and here I was bitching about a few hundred failed attempts. I couldn't give up now. I had to do it for them, and I had to do it for me. I wasn't going to stop until I had my sub 25. Run number 99. I was back, and with a vengeance. This run was on point, ahead of my PB until the shield split, where I was unknowingly 1 rupee short to buy a shield and made me lose some time on my way to the Deku Tree. I managed to make it back and more, clutching the interior of the Deku Tree, the Gohma Clip, and the wrong warp. Here I was again, the 17-minute mark at the beginning of the collapse sequence. I didn't have any room for mistakes, and during the collapse sequence, I didn't make any. Nearly 40 seconds ahead going into the Ganon fight. Just don't get hit, stay out of the fire, focus, and get ISG. Easy peasy. First cycle. Second try. Beautiful. Second cycle. Grab the sword, focus on the slash, and getting ISG. Fuck. Alright, make space, calm down, don't blow it. Get ISG. Alright, just don't get hit. Well, fuck. Another potential PB, another failed attempt. At this very moment I was thinking, I'm gonna let everybody down, aren't I? Surprisingly enough, I got an answer. The little green fairy boy from the forest said, nah. I'm the goddamn hero of time. And so are you. Now, this run might not have been sub 25, but something about beating my PB by over 30 seconds, especially with such a bad ending segment, had me more confident than ever I was going to do this. Run 103. Fuck! Damn it! Okay, okay, maybe not that one. Run 109. Okay, come on. You got this. Fuck, dude, I just pumped everyone up. Jesus. Run 114. Was this the run? Starting off pretty smooth. I even had chat telling me that I was going to pull off escape clip easy. First try. Okay, second try. Alright, so maybe this isn't the run, but practice is practice. Let's play it out. Everything up until Ganondoor was pretty rough, and then... Holy shit. I didn't expect that. Going into the Ganon fight, I was 7 seconds behind. But if you recall, I did extremely bad on the final split in my last PB. So this could actually be the one. Come on, you fucking cutscenes! Don't get hit, Stay out of the fire. Focus. Get ISG. Fuck! No! Fuck! 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 Did I have it? Oh god, I hate this shit, dude. Ah! Come on, cutscene, please. Come on, cutscene, hurry up! Come on! Come on! It wasn't sub 25, but it was another PB. And this time, only 3 seconds away from my goal. And have a look at those beginning deltas. Oh yeah, I fucking got this. Run 127.
He's a legend. He's a legend.
Do some push-ups.
Yeah, fuck it. We're doing push-ups, chat. We're doing push-ups. Alright, I just did 75 push-ups. I did 3 push-ups, chat.
Yes! Let's go!
Woo!
He's a legend.
36 days after I plugged in my Nintendo 64 for the first time in 20 years, in under 6 weeks after a few hundred practice attempts, 24 minutes and 41 seconds after starting my 127th official attempt to defeat Ganon in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, I had achieved my goal. For the first time, I could see my name on the speedrun leaderboards among people of all different walks of life from around the world. Welcome new community members into my stream, and made countless friends in the speedrunning community that I now have a completely new level of respect for than I ever had. Now, this entire process, all the research of the history, putting together all the hardware I needed to make as high quality content as I could here, getting things like matching fonts and hand making all of the assets from scratch, not to mention learning the route, practicing and perfecting it so that I could actually meet my goal, in total took me about 2 months of work. Now, despite the fact that the YouTube algorithm being what it is, I'm only going to be getting a tiny fraction of my usual viewership. I'll probably end up losing subscribers and won't even make back on ad revenue what I spent on my Nintendo 64 controller. And also, despite the fact that while streaming Ocarina of Time, I was sitting at a tiny fraction of my normal viewership, constantly getting shit on by random folks coming in telling me to change games or that my stream is dead, I regret none of it. This whole thing wasn't about money, and it wasn't about subscribers. I'm doing it for me, and if you made it this far into the video without unsubscribing, I did it for you too. If you enjoyed this and want to say thank you, the best way you can do that is to support the speedrunners who helped support me throughout this process. These folks, along with all the legends in the community, those who work at the Cloud Modding Wiki or in the Ocarina of Time speedrunning Discord, are the real unsung heroes that deserve all the views and respect and praise and clicks and donations. Links in the description for all my new friends. I hope that you go and give them all a follow. If you want more content like this in the future, tossing it a like, leaving a comment, and subbing to the channel, and better yet, sharing it with your friends, whether they're into speedrunning or not, will keep me motivated to do more. If you don't want more content like this, well, too fucking bad. Because coming up next time is the story of how I, inspired by this legend, became a Super Mario 64 speedrunner in 1 month, attempting to beat the game in under 25 minutes. Now, I have to warn you, speedrunning Super Mario 64 has turned out to be a completely different ballgame. I'm going to be in for my biggest challenge yet, and you won't believe what happens along the way. Next time on the Heroes of Time.